Stand by for broadcast.
You're listening to Inside Air, a behind-the-wire view of the Royal Air Force, its people, technology and operations.
Hello, I'm Flight Lieutenant Peter Lisney, and in this episode 13, we hear from 13 Squadron, who crew remotely piloted air systems. We'll also reheat a few stories, just in case you missed them. But first, see if you can identify this noise. Find out if you're right at the end of this episode. Now, the cockpit stays in the hangar, but the aircraft flies thousands of miles away. We're talking remotely piloted air systems, and our correspondent, Flight Lieutenant Chris Sully, spoke to 13 Squadron to find out more.
I have to say, for the role that we were fulfilling, there wasn't any difference between Herrick on Tornado and Herrick on Reaper.
It's oftentimes not what we do at work. It's actually real life getting in the way. And I speak from very personal experience.
So one of the key things for us, particularly when it comes to engagements, is just understanding that pattern of life. The longevity of the aircraft and the persistence that we have means that we can stay there for a long time, build up a decent pattern of life for a number of hours.
So my name's Wing Commander Kat. I'm the Squadron Officer Commanding for 13 Squadron, based at RAF Waddington, and I'm responsible for supporting almost 200 personnel from regular reserves, US and UK contractors to deliver operations using the Reaper remotely piloted air system.
It's a significant number of people that you look after. And it's a significant role going forward. What does your job entail on a day-to-day basis?
Gosh, it's very varied. So today, for instance, I was authorising, so supervising live operational flying in theatre from Waddington. So that involves briefing all the crews about the weather, about the tasks they're going to go and do, any information about the aircraft that they're going to be flying, and then supervising them and approving their crew combinations and any training events that they're planning to do, or any operational requirements that they might need to carry out. So that was first thing this morning. I'm now speaking to you, and then this afternoon I've got a couple of VTCs that I need to do with our operational chain of command in theatre, and then I'm back in again at 4:30 tomorrow morning to fly myself. So incredibly varied. So
a really big and busy role. And for 13 Squadron, a fairly significant change over the years then.
Absolutely. So I had the privilege of serving on the Squadron about 5 or 6 years ago. So I've really had the chance to sort of see us when it was most intense, and now we're in a much more sort of stable, regular routine. So it's been fascinating. MQ-9 Reaper came into sort of the UK infantry as a urgent operational requirement, initially in 39 Squadron out in the US, in support of our troops in Afghanistan, and then 13 Squadron stood up in 2012 in the UK. And then we transitioned from Afghanistan to Iraq and Syria in 2014-15. So it's been a fascinating time to be involved with this particular capability, and really exciting when you look forward to our future.
And you talk about those two theatres, concurrent theatres, so a busy time since standing up.
Very much so. I joined just towards the end of our time in Afghanistan, having actually served on Op Herrick myself in theatre. And it was without doubt busy, and certainly the first year or so in Iraq and Syria was very busy too. It was at a time when we had a really broad mix of people on the Squadron. Effectively, we had a cast of sort of aircrew, ops, J2 and Met support who'd been brought together from all sorts of backgrounds, from helicopters, from fast jets, multi-engine, other intelligence, surveillance, reconnaissance platforms, who all brought their individual specialist skills to this new capability being flown from the UK, certainly. And it was a great time, but it was very, very busy, very long shifts. And the Royal Air Force, and I think UK Defence, was just understanding what we'd taken on board. And we saw us transition from an urgent operational requirement to a core capability in 2015.
And for the Squadron itself, presumably the fact that you're based at Waddington and various other locations, but is there still the same sort of spirit of a squadron that you get elsewhere?
I think there is. Obviously, COVID has rather changed the tone in the last sort of 12 months, but there really is. When I reflect on the pride, the appreciation of our history and what we've done in the past, that's very similar to every other squadron that I've served on. The camaraderie, the social events, and certainly in my time when I was last on the squadron, we were just starting to be able to start up sort of sporting events and adventurous training opportunities and things like that. It was very limited because we were on continuous ops and remained so, but we still took those opportunities. So different and the same at the same time, which I think you get with any new capability.
You mentioned the camaraderie. We are hearing from time to time the mainstream media talk about mental health challenges and things like that go on. What would you say to those people who query that side of things, which we're hearing about increasingly at the moment?
I think that we get sort of peaks of interest into this for a variety of reasons. And I think it's quite reasonable to reflect on bringing a new system and a new way of working into defence and then understanding the implications it might have on our people. I think it's really important that we recognise that that's different. However, we've got a team of people who are very well trained, who are now very well supported. When I look at the breadth of support that we have for our people, everything from padres through to charitable organisations like SAFA, the welfare support on station, the medics, etc. It's really impressive. I think we just have to be realistic that it's oftentimes not what we do at work. It's actually real life getting in the way. And I speak from very personal experience, that I lost my mother last year. And actually that was more challenging for me personally. And we see that in a lot of our people. They have families, they have friends, and real life gets in the way on occasions. So I think that's the important thing, that we can make sure we support them through those life experiences to allow them to sort of then blossom at work as well, and recognise that what we ask of them, working long hours, shift work, does put pressure on them, but it also puts pressure on their families, and we just have to be realistic about that. But I think we're in a much better place than we have been. And
I guess if you think about it, we've all been away at various times, or people have been away on operations. When you go on operations, if you're based with a squadron somewhere, you can just immerse yourself in that completely. When you're leaving 9 to 5, I use that term very loosely, when you're going home to family, as you say, I guess those problems suddenly step back to the forefront. It's sometimes difficult to balance.
Certainly, having deployed myself on operations, there's a certain, I hesitate to use the term, but sort of luxury and selfishness that comes with going on operations. Because you've trained as a team, you've deployed as a team, your one focus is on that op, and then you recover as a team. And I think there's quite a luxury in that, because it does allow you to really focus. And oftentimes you end up somewhere where actually communications is quite difficult. Although, of course, that's improving over time quite rapidly. I think the benefit we've got here is we can offer people a really stable but extremely enjoyable and quite extensive career opportunity. Because there's no doubt that sort of remotely piloted air systems are a core part of the Air Force future and Defence's future. So it's going to be entirely possible that our pilots, our sensors, our mission intelligence coordinators, our ops staff, our J2, everyone involved could have a full career on RPAS. So I think that's the really interesting thing. So now that we've got to the point where it's recognised as being a core part of our future, I think we've appreciated how we balance people's lives more. We've got more sustainable shift patterns now. And I think people join us knowing what it's about. So we've got now several generations worth of people who've joined to fly RPAS, rather than, as I was saying before, a group of highly specialised individuals brought together from a variety of different platforms to deliver on an urgent operational requirement. So the dynamics change.
So I'm Flight Lieutenant Ian. I'm a Reaper pilot on 13 Squadron in the Air Force. I've been a Reaper pilot for about 4 years now, but I've been in the Air Force for a fair bit longer. I spent 8 years as an engineering officer before changing over to become an aircrew and do this.
Yeah, so Sergeant Danny here. I've been in the Air Force 12 years. Trade Group 11, which is an intelligence analyst. I'm currently specialised as a mission intelligence coordinator. I've been doing it for the last 3.5 years.
Tornado Sean. I've got 1,500 hours of Reaper. I was a Tornado nav prior to this. I did Op Herrick in 2011, crossed over to Reaper in 2013, did Op Herrick on Reaper, Shader, staff tours, the requirements manager for Protector, and then back here as a flight commander.
Ian, just tell me to start with, for those unfamiliar with how the squadron works, how the system works, just talk us briefly through the setup that you have at Waddington.
So I think the biggest thing to understand about Reaper is it's identical to every other aircraft with one big exception, and that's that we're not sat in the aircraft, we're sat a few thousand miles away. And because of that, we have everything that a normal squadron would have from an aircrew perspective here, all of the planning functions, all of the support functions, all of the intelligence functions, but our cockpits stay in the hangar and our aircraft go flying from a few thousand miles away.
From your perspective as a pilot, is there any huge difference when you sit behind the controls, when you sit there? Does it feel the same? Are you aware that it's a different operating platform? I
think you're always going to feel or not feel the fact that you're not in an aircraft. So you've not got the vibration, you've not got the feeling of G, you've not got any of the seat of the pants flying experience. But in terms of talking to outside agencies, speaking to air traffic control, flying an aircraft like you would fly an aircraft with all the same effects of the clouds get bigger and smaller as you move the controls, those things are still there. You just don't feel it in the same way you would for a normal aircraft.
Moving over to yourself, Sean, with your previous experience with Tornado Force, moving over to the Reaper, how much of a difference was it for you? How was it sort of stepping up to that role?
I have to say, for the role that we were fulfilling, there wasn't any difference between Herrick on Tornado and Herrick on Reaper. You are still completely immersed in what you're seeing. It was just that I wasn't flying around in the dark looking through a TV tab. I was sat a few thousand miles away looking at a screen in the dark, but still doing the same job. But what I will say is, what I found is that you were closer to the fight than you've ever been. Even though we were so far away physically, the level of fidelity we had or have makes the fight that much more real, but it also allows you to make the right decision at the right time based on the right information.
Danny, I'll come to you. Your role as a mission intelligence coordinator, how much does it help that you're working so closely alongside the team who are able to deliver you the instant picture?
Yeah, very close. I mean, they're in the same chat windows that we're in. We have them on two different phones, so a secure and a clear phone. We see them every day prior to going. We get all our pre-mission briefs and everything to do with the system setups we get from our comms. J2 team brief us on exactly what we're going to do. Ops team prepare us for the operational environment, so where we're going to fly, ATOs, what we need to consider for the mission. And then when we go down, we keep that communication with them through the systems that we've got. And then when we come up, we debrief afterwards and can get them involved in the debrief of how that day went.
So in terms of day-to-day working, day-to-day operations, is there a huge difference between what you're doing now and what you've done previously, or is it broadly similar?
It's completely different. So like I said, it's that interaction with the supported unit and seeing the live, basically the feedback of everything that you're doing, you get it live. Whereas previously, like I said, creating that imagery product, you get a request in, you look at the imagery, you analyze it, you make it look really nice with colors and symbols, put it into a template and send it off, and you will, 9 times out of 10, you will never know how that product is used or whether it was successful, what happened from it. Whereas this, everything you do, you will get either the reaction from the unit that you're supporting, either the communication links in chat rooms or on radio, or you will see it visually on the feed that you're monitoring.
Sean, if I can come back to you, just talk me through when you come into work, when you've briefed and you're prepared, how does it work? Where do you all physically sit in relation to each other, and who's doing what?
It's really a mindset shift, and you're in your flying bubble, I guess. And as soon as you enter the ground control station, we are sat next to each other, pilot, sensor operator. And the ground control station is effectively an ISO container, so you can imagine that. Pilot and sensor sat next to each other at one end, and at the other end is the mission intelligence coordinator. So the three of us in a relatively small space, which is great though. Although we're on intercom, we're also able to see what each other are doing to sort of add an element or improve our crew resource management within that environment. But yeah, it's quite a close working environment.
Just talk me through an average shift. How would it work? How many hours on average will you be sort of expected to be on duty?
So for me, like coming in the first thing in the morning to fly, by the time we've briefed, gone down to the GCS, set up and game, you're probably looking at 2.5 to 3 hours, and you'll come out for a break, then go back down for an hour or so, then you go back down for a couple of hours. And in that break, I'll probably grab a sandwich, something to eat, potentially depending on what time it is, jump onto the emails, and then go back down to fly. And then post-flying, we'll in-brief, lessons learned, spread that around. Then it's very much set out back into being an exec then, and then log in and deal with the other stuff that I've got to deal with on a daily basis as a flight commander.
Ian, I'll come to you now, if I may, just from the perspective of the different way of working. Previously, you would have deployed off to a frontline operating base somewhere and been doing that. Now you're based at Waddington. You're living a normal life. You're able to go home and do other things. And when we're able to, again, you're able to go to the pub and do those kind of things in between. How does that compare? Does that make any difference to the way that you work your shifts and work with the team?
I think it clearly makes a certain difference. I think the biggest difference that's made is we work a slightly odd shift pattern that doesn't align with a 7-day week, and we do it every day of the year, every year since 2013 onwards. And it does start to take a little bit of a toll with the fact that it can be hard to get a good working life balance at home, because you don't have every weekend. You don't necessarily have a nice regular pattern that someone else can plan things against. But I think actually the difference between going away on ops and having that nice box to close around something you do for a period of time and come back, I think I prefer doing ops from home, because you can enjoy it for longer. You get to draw little boxes around everything. I leave home in the morning. I come home at the end of the day, and that's done. And I sort of close the box around it for that day, and I get to see a lot more of my family. So it does work very well for me from where I am in my point of life at the moment. But I wouldn't necessarily say that it's worse or better for going away for long periods of time.
Is there any element of going away when you'd be sort of living and working with a whole team of people, and that shared experience, that bonding, that team working together? Is there any of that you miss, or is it very much the same on a sort of, I use the term 9 to 5 loosely, but on that kind of basis?
I think there is I think it is largely the same. It's largely the same without the pain of having to go away for 6 months and missing home, and home missing you. So the way that our shift patterns work, we do generally get sort of blobbed into thirds of the squadron. So you do see the same sort of people day in, day out, and you build those sort of bonds with them. So I think it works quite well.
And just looking at the way that 13 Squadron integrates with the whole of the Reaper force, how does that work on a practical basis? Because again, obviously you're remotely working.
So with the rest of the Reaper force, we integrate very well because we do the same thing, and we're a small enough community that we know each other quite well. So we know enough people on our sister squadron, and they know enough of us. So when we speak on the phone to hand aircraft over and some of the things that we do like that, we know each other. So I think that does work quite well, being the small Reaper community. But as for integrating into the rest of the Air Force, or especially the rest of the station, because of the 24/7 nature of our work and the slightly difficult shift patterns we work, I would say we integrate less well into the station to some of the more traditional squadrons who aren't on ops permanently, and thus can work a more home shift schedule. So maybe they'll only fly Monday to Friday when they're not on ops.
I'm going to ask you a controversial question now. I'm going to ask it of all three of you. We talk about RPAS systems, and we talk about UAVs and whatever else. The public still, and the newspapers love calling them drones. Is that a real embarrassment, or is it something you just accept that, well, that's the way the public refer to them?
I don't think we're ever going to change the public now. There was a chance maybe 10 years ago to change the narrative from drones to RPA or UAV or something like that, and it just didn't happen. So now, whereas we might call drones the little small quadcopters that people have for sort of hobbies, the public don't. So I think we need to embrace the fact that we might doctrinally call ourselves RPAS or RPAs, and we are so different to everything else that a public-owned drone quadcopter might be. The public still think we're drone pilots, and that's what they call us. So it's up to us to make sure the message goes out that regardless of what they call us, they understand what we do and how we do it, and how we're not really that different from any other aircraft the Air Force flies, other than we can stay airborne for a significantly longer time.
And presumably, Danny, from the perspective of the ability of the platform itself, the ability to stay in that location for a longer period of time, actually it gives you more of a chance to build up that intelligence picture and decide on where you're going.
Yeah, so one of the key things for us, particularly when it comes to engagements, is just understanding that pattern of life. The longevity of the aircraft and, the persistence that we have means that we can stay there for a long time, build up a decent pattern of life for a number of hours. Whereas our fast jet counterparts, they may be able to provide an hour or two, and then they would have to go and refuel if they needed to come back, whereas we can stay. And what that gives you is the amount of time that we can actually stay, as we can see the differences maybe between the pattern of life during the day and then the pattern of life during the night, or the pattern of life during an episodic event. So given the current places where we are, prayer times and things like that.
Sean, we talked a little bit about the use of the word drones and stuff, and there is a public perception of what the platform is in their mind. From your perspective, what would you say to those people who see it as a war game, people not sort of making decisions on logic basis? Because presumably nothing has changed from the operator's point of view.
No, I would just like to say that this isn't anything clever. This is fly-by-wire. It's just a really long wire. But what we are able to do through connectivity is ensure that the ground commander has the right intelligence, and we can offer that through persistence. And when we are making a decision, or someone else is making a decision, we're enacting that. It's based on sound intelligence, real-time intelligence, which we couldn't always offer with legacy platforms. But a force mix of that is really, really capable. And the other thing with the word drone, like the guys said, we're not necessarily going to change the term, but what we can do is help educate and influence the younger generation now on what that term means. It's certainly nothing to be afraid of. It came with a lot of negative connotations, but I think over time and with a generation shift, that term is going to people will start to understand the term drone as remotely piloted and not be afraid of it. It's just at the moment it's still quite different.
Ian, obviously we're operating Reaper at the moment. A couple of years ago at RIAP, we saw Protector coming across the Atlantic for the first time and landing at Fairford, remotely operated. How much of a difference is that going to make to the force and to the squadron?
So I think the big thing to understand about Protector is it's not necessarily a big leap in terms of technology. It's incremental advances in all of the airframe and everything else, but it brings with it the certification that's been missing for so many years to operate Protector in civil airspace, and especially in the UK, in a way that we've never been able to before. So with Protector, we'll have the opportunity to operate in the UK and in a significantly vaster amount of theatres where we don't have to have a special arrangement that allows us to operate Reaper, which is an aircraft that doesn't have the same levels of airworthiness certification that this new aircraft Protector we're buying has. So the opportunity to operate it in the UK means it will be based out of Wellington permanently. We'll be able to train in the UK, and most importantly, we'll be able to deploy in the UK to support UK assets. So maybe a maritime role supporting the new Poseidon aircraft, or maybe perhaps a counter-terrorism role supporting some of the other assets that are around. And our capability to stay airborne for 48 hours or just have a permanent presence over the UK I think is going to be a significant game changer for what we as the RAF's remotely piloted aircraft teams can bring.
Sean, do you miss airborne hands-on flying, sort of seat of the pants and being pulling G, or is it something that doesn't hold any big draw for you now?
Yeah, you know what? I absolutely loved it, and I still love it. Do I miss it? Yes. I'm just glad that I had the opportunity to do it. But what I will say about this is the most operationally rewarding thing I've ever done in my time in the Air Force, and that's been like 18 years now. So yeah, it's different, but I am passionate about the capability and what we can deliver and what we are delivering.
What's the future for the platform? Is it the future? Are we still going to see pilots in things other than non-transport aircraft, would you say?
So I think there will always be a person in the cockpit, but what we'll see in the future more and more is that sort of hybrid effect of manned air power and unmanned air power working together to achieve, to meet the requirement, depending on what that requirement is. So there's definitely going to be a shift. It is a kind of a revolution in military affairs and the way we fight. There are pros and cons to everything. And I think a mix of the two is definitely the way forward. And you only have to look on open source to see programs such as Tempest, where you're looking to incorporate manned and unmanned or swarming technology to meet certain requirements. But as those requirements change, it will pivot towards one or the other, depending on what's needed.
And you mentioned swarming technology. I've read a little bit about that. Just explain what that will mean in the future.
Well, I don't want to talk out of turn on this, and I'm not that au fait with it myself. However, it will allow you it will be a force multiplier effectively in terms of one sort of mothership aircraft able to achieve a greater effect using swarming technology. For anyone who's not familiar, effectively, if you think one guy flying along in his aircraft, and then he's got a lot of loyal wingmen, which are unmanned, smaller, more agile aircraft perhaps, or different sensors on them that can do that one mothership's bidding to achieve the effect. So yeah, one mothership and lots of sort of loyal wingmen which are unmanned, which are controlled from that one mothership.
Danny, just coming to you for a second, somebody coming into your particular role now within in the intelligence community, what would you say to them coming into this role? Because it is changing, it's evolving, and presumably it's a really cutting edge place to work.
Yeah, I mean, you've just hit the nail on the head there. It is at the cutting edge of what Trade Group 11 do, I believe. So like I said, I've been a mission intelligence coordinator now for 3.5 years. This job has been the steepest learning curve, but also the most enjoyable. So I'm actually quite passionate about everything I've learned so far to do with this role. The only change for this role is we have a minimum rank requirement of a corporal. So anyone that would come to this job would be on promotion. And then as it's an aircrew role, there's a lot more expected of you than just a regular Trade Group 11 role. Various other documents that we've got to be well versed in to understand how we operate. And then the role itself, it's almost like you have to be fully engaged from the moment you walk through that door to the moment you leave. There's no switch off period. It's not like any other job where I can go and sit at my desk, start a product, and then I'm going to go and have a coffee break. You are engaged, from the moment, like I said, the moment you walk in to the moment you leave. So it's quite a high pressure role.
What would you say is the most rewarding aspect of that on a day-to-day basis?
The most rewarding for me is if we're supporting guys that are on the ground and we manage to carry out the objectives for them. So if we need to escort them from one place to the other to make sure they don't come under attack, if they don't get attacked, or if we manage to find someone before they attack them, that's the most rewarding. To basically prevent any friendly force casualties or prevent any events that could happen to them.
And for you, Ian, somebody thinking maybe of looking at swapping branches, roles, changing positions, what would you say is the best thing about your job, about your role?
I think it's, as Sean said, this is the most operationally focused and relevant part of arguably the whole Royal Air Force. Looking at the customers we work for, the operations that we're engaged in, and the persistent high-level operations that we're doing, no one else is at the tip of the spear like we are. And I think that constant involvement in the most important operations this country undertakes from the air is probably the best thing about this job. And
for yourself, Sean?
I think it's just every time we step into, we're not training, we have an operational output for the customer. And we do that 365, 24/7. And we will continue to do that for as long as this thing's around, and into Protector as well. We are a persistent skyhook at the end of the day. But it's rewarding because you go home and it's not like you've just turned up to train, you've actually had an impact. And it's about downstream prevention. We're here to meet requirements that are formed out of the UK defence tasks. And that's what we do on a daily basis.
Sean, picking up on that sort of joint force aspect and the across the board, the whole force aspect, how important is that to Reaper?
I think it's absolutely critical for this capability. Without a whole force approach to the RPAS capability, I don't think it's sustainable in the future. It's what makes it so capable. It allows us to be agile as much as we can be, but also it's sustainable. And I don't think the whole force approach to this will ever go away. It has to sustain.
So, and we talk about whole force, you are talking about every element, the civilian element, the reservists, the regulars?
Yes, servicemen, reservists, contractors, civilian contractors. So from everyone, it really is a team effort on RPAS to keep this thing going. Because you have to remember, it's not stopped since it came in. And that's been hard on everyone to try and sustain it. But, we've improved, we've learnt, and we've grown over time. And I'm really excited about the future because we really have sort of laid the foundations here on Reaper. And I think Protector is going to be a gateway capability.
We touched a little bit there. We spoke with the boss about how mental health issues have been discussed and the balance of home life and frontline operations. How do you feel about that?
Personally, having spent a long time on this platform, it's not necessarily about what we do or what we see. There was a lot of stigma attached to that. I think it was easy for people just to assume. I don't know, we can blame Hollywood for that. We can blame whatever else. But actually, the reality of it is this is no different to any other iStar platform or even like the Tornadoes when they were operating out of Germany. It's about the juxtaposition of constant operations from home and being able to flip between the two. And there are benefits to that, but there are also cons to that. But this is nothing new.
So from an operational point, a day-to-day point of view, it's this or it's 3 months deploying off to somewhere hot and dusty or to the Falkland Islands on the Tornado Force as was, Typhoons now. No real difference.
I don't think there's no real difference to other platforms on the iStar Force or where Tornadoes operating out of Germany, that was operations from home. This is nothing new. Obviously, I think having deployed, and once you're deployed and this is all you do, that's all you have to think about, that's actually easier, personally, for me, than the sustained operational output and home life at the same time. But it ebbs and flows. It all depends on what's going on in your life and what's going on operations. Sometimes operations are really, really busy and home life might be quiet and it's all good. Sometimes operations will be quiet and home life will be really busy, and that's fine. It's when the two are really, really busy that it can sometimes be a bit more difficult to manage. But again, in any organization, people will struggle with those two things. This is all about work-life balance, and everyone's different. But that's been my experience. I've not had any sort of negative effects from what I've done. Sometimes it's just been hard balancing work and life, but I don't think that's any different to anyone else.
And one last question to wrap up this edition of Inside Air. It's for the boss of 13 Squadron, Kat, the Wing Commander.
Just finally to wrap us up here, you mentioned in passing the future for the capability. When we look at the 6th generation fighter jets that are coming in and the idea of swarming drones, how big a part do you feel RPAS systems are going to play in the future of the Royal Air Force?
An absolutely critical part. And I think your point there about the sort of the breadth of the capability is critical, because you're going to want lots of small, less expensive, potentially disposable swarms where you can afford to lose a number of them, but you'll still be able to sustain a capability. And then you'll have these sort of the higher end, more capable platforms that will deliver in other circumstances, just as we do in conventional aircraft. You need the mix. And I think it's really important that we learn how to integrate them together. And this is always the key, so that we can work absolutely smoothly and in a highly sophisticated fashion with our conventional platforms, because there are some things that we'll be able to do that others won't be able to do. And I think that's really important to remember. So I think there's probably a place for everyone. I haven't quite worked out what the proportions should be, but I'm obviously always going to be biased because I think RPAS offers you something that very few other platforms can offer you.
This is Reheat with LAC Victoria Andrews, bringing you a look back at some recent news from the RAF. RAF Typhoons have been exercising alongside US and French aircrew on Exercise Atlantic Trident, a 2-week joint exercise aimed at developing skills in working together, the ability to operate as one team, and exploiting strengths of the aircraft. Taking place over southwest and central France, the Typhoons have joined daily events by flying from their home base at RAF Coningsby, supported by RAF Voyager tankers from RAF Bryce Norton. RAF Coningsby Station Commander Group Captain Matt Peterson recognises the importance of these exercises.
The importance of working with our allies, and actually why we have done it for so very many years, is really obvious. We are much strengthened by this type of exercising, and also it is borne fruit when we deliver our operations away from home base across the world.
The I-Star Air Wing has been stood up at RAF Waddington. It's been formed as part of the RAF Future Operating Model, which will create the next generation Air Force. It will comprise of the Flying Squadrons, Air Support Wing, Air Engineering Wing, No. 1 Intelligence, Surveillance and Reconnaissance Wing, and the I-Star Operational Conversion Unit. The station will continue to operate as normal, supporting the operational outputs of the Air and Space Warfare Centre, 8 Force Protection Wing, and its various reserve units. And finally, last seen in 2019, the Red Arrows have been granted public display authority to return to the skies for their 57th season. The new aerobatic show will first be seen at the Midlands Air Festival, followed by a 4-month summer campaign across the UK and mainland Europe. Red 1 Squadron Leader Boole said how getting to this point was the culmination of several months of hard work, and everyone's dedication to the task has brought us to this point, whether they be fellow pilots in the team or our highly trained support staff. That's Reheat on Inside Air.
I'm SAC Simon Ross with this episode's Name That Noise. That was the sound of an F-35B Lightning stealth fighter launching from the deck of the Royal Navy aircraft carrier HMS Queen Elizabeth. As the Lightning pilot powers down the deck, the aircraft gets airborne with the aid of a 6-metre high ramp on the bow of the ship. Known as the ski ramp, this enables the Lightning to undertake a short takeoff carrying a higher payload of weapons. 617 Squadron, the Dam Busters based at RAF Marham, are currently aboard the carrier as a component part of Carrier Strike Group 21, the inaugural operational deployment of HMS Queen Elizabeth. This is the first time UK fighter aircraft are embarked on an operational aircraft carrier deployment since 2010. Equipped with advanced sensors, mission systems and stealth technology, these next-generation multi-role combat aircraft can carry out intelligence, surveillance and reconnaissance tasks, but most importantly represent the strike in Carrier Strike Group.
That's all for this episode of Inside Air. Please give us a review and subscribe on your favourite podcast app, and join us again soon.
You've been listening to Inside Air, a behind-the-wire view of the Royal Air Force, its people, technology and operations. If you're serving in the RAF and have a story for us, please speak to your unit media and communications officer. Inside Air is written and produced for the Royal Air Force by RAF Media Reserves.